Hey guys, this is Denise, and I'm going to give you all a good start on getting the structure of Lab 6 put together. Don't forget, Lab 6 is due before you go on fall break. That would be October 16th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This lab is completely for extra credit. I highly recommend doing it. From here on out, I'm going to assume that you have read the lab write-up, so I have it pulled up over here on this side of the screen. Let's get to it. In Code Light, I have a new project, Lab 6 Part A. Let's get started. Don't forget to fill this in later. This is just your program header with all the details that you always have to have. Part A is your include statements. Right now, from what I can see, the only thing you need is IOStream. We might fill that in later with something else. From my first glimpse, I can't really tell. Part B, this will be your declarations. Your function prototype definitions will go in here. Part C, that is always your main function. And Part D, all your function definitions. The majority of your code today is going to be down here below main because Lab 6 is mainly asking you to write a lot of functions. So, since you're writing so many functions, let's make sure you don't forget to comment the brace for the end of main. Otherwise, it's going to get lost with all the code that we're putting in there. Get your return 0 in, and I think this is the main chunk of the code. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a menu up and working for Lab 6 Part A, and I'm going to have it properly call these 3 functions. In addition to having it properly call those 3 functions, I'm going to get a couple of the other design elements put together. Make sure that you read all of these things very, very specifically, such as making sure your floating point values are printing to the right decimal place. Those are the kind of details I'm not really going to go through now. So just make sure that before you turn it in, you comb through them so that your code is getting all of these various pieces together. The menu is going to look like this, and that is where I'm going to start. Now, to give you a good example of a void function, I'm going to write the menu as a void function, and that'll kind of help you with getting some of the functions for Part B together. So we're going to start here in int main, and the first thing you always do inside int main is you put all of your variable declarations in one spot. We are going to need an int, and that int is going to stand for the function to call. So in this lab, at the very, very end of the day, you are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different functions, and then that int will be 7. It will be 7 if you're supposed to quit. So that's going to be my int function to call. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write a void function that takes function to call as a reference parameter, and then it switches on that variable. The function name is going to be called menu, and we're going to pass it function to call. That is going to be passed by reference. So here we go. Let's go back up to Part B. We're kind of doing these out of order, but we're writing a general skeleton for this code right now. So up here, menu is going to be a void. It's called menu. The function is called menu, and it's going to take an int by reference function to call. Inside main, all we're going to do is we're going to print our menu. Then we are going to switch on the variable function to call. Case 1 would be for the first function that you are being asked to write in Part A, which is inches to centimeters. So that will call the function inches to centimeters. And then we can break. Case 2 is going to call the function BMI, and then we can break. Case 3 is going to call the function distance between 2 points. I'm just going to call that distance, but let me see if that's a bad name according to what we've got to do in Part B. Are there any other distance functions in Part B? We have distance, min, max, mod, Taylor series, and quit. All right, distance will work for this lab. We're going to make a function called a distance. Then we're going to break, and then always you have your default. And in there we just break. All I want main to do right now is to declare this variable function to call, pass it by reference to another function called menu, and then we're going to switch on the value of function to call and call other functions based on that value. That is all we're going to do in main, and then we return 0. So we're going to start with menu function to call. That is the only function prototype declaration that we have up here. Your function definitions go below main, so let's write our first function. It is called menu. It is going to take an int by reference, function to call, and since we are going to have so many functions done here, you need to comment your braces for the end of your various functions. Before you turn your labs in, make sure you put a function definition above each function, and maybe a better word would be a function description. D-E-S-C-R-I-P-T, description. So on top of each of your functions, make sure you have a function description. I'm not going to write them for you right now. All we're going to do in menu is print the menu to the user, allow them to select a function number, and that's it. Print it to the user and allow them to select a function number. We're going to read that straight into function to call, and then because it is passed by reference here, when you return to main on line 14, that value is going to be stored in function to call, in the function to call integer. So let's follow the cin and cout statements that are right here on the lab. Cout. Please make a selection from the following menu. There's a new line there with no spaces and no punctuation of any kind. I'm going to make my window a little bit bigger. Right now, all our menu has is 2 new lines, actually. 2 new lines. And now we have cout. The first option is 1 inches to centimeters. New line. Cout, option 2. BMI with a new line. Cout, option 3 is distance between 2 points. New line. There are 2 new lines on that one right now. That is going to change as you move on in this lab. So what we're going to do at this point is the function that is called menu is going to print the menu out, and it's going to take the cin value and it's going to read the value straight into function to call. Here's a hint for part B. You will need to loop here, and you will need to loop until you get a valid answer. And by valid answer, in part B, they specifically ask you, let me find it, a bunch of examples. You need to keep asking the user for another value if they haven't given you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. But that's for part B. Right now, we're going to assume that they give you a valid answer. And right now, the only options are 1, 2, and 3. Our menu just prints this out to the screen. It reads the value into function to call. Because it's a void, there is no return statement. So this function is completely done. That means that once you come up here to main and you call menu, it's going to come down here, print this out to the screen. It's going to read in the user selection straight into the variable function to call, so that back up here in main, when we are done executing the menu function, we can switch on that value. And specifically, we're going to switch and make calls to all of these functions. Right now, just to see if they're going to work, I'm going to get their function prototype declarations put up here, They're not going to be perfect for what we need to do in lab, but I just want to see if it, just want to make sure that this skeleton works. So we are going to start with a void function. It is going to be called inches to centimeters. It is not going to take any parameters because right here we're not passing anything to it yet. We also are going to have a void function called BMI. Now we're going to have another void function called distance. I reiterate, this may not be the final structure for these three functions. I just want to get the code to compile and to get it to run to make sure we're properly calling them before we go any further. That means that I need to go ahead and get some work down here for these functions. So we're going to write the remaining three functions for inches to centimeters, BMI, and distance. These functions are not going to do anything other than let the user know that they called them. We're not going to do the math yet that the actual lab asks for. We're just going to keep doing some of the outlining of this whole lab. Down here, below menu, end of menu, we are going to start function for the inches to centimeters. Right now, it's a void. This might change. Inches to centimeters. It does not take any parameters. Again, this is going to have to change. This is the end of inches to centimeters. For this example right now, all I'm going to do is print out to the terminal that you successfully called inches to centimeters. Just a sanity check to make sure that we're doing our function calls correctly. I'm going to do that same thing for the next two functions that we need to write. We still need to write BMI and distance. So void BMI, it isn't going to take anything right now. That's going to change. This is the end of BMI, and all I want is a printout statement. We're just going to print out to the user that you successfully called BMI. And the last one we're going to do is another void function. This one is called distance, and you guessed it, we're just going to print out to the screen you successfully called distance. Now, we're going to need to do actual real math that do what these various functions are saying that they're going to do, but right now we're just getting the skeleton set up. This is end of distance. And for good coding practice, and to get all the points for this lab, you need to put a function description up here. DESCRIPTION. Those need to go in front of all of your functions. We're not doing them right now together. That's just something for you to remember to do before you turn it in. So right now, our main function doesn't really do much. The only thing main does is it comes in right here on line 13 and it declares an int named function to call. Then it's going to call our menu function, which will print out to the user the menu. It will read in their selection to our variable, which has been passed by reference. Therefore, when you leave the menu function, you're able to switch on that variable up here in int main. We're going to switch on it and then successfully call three different functions based on the user's input. Let's compile, see if this works as it is. And we're going to pause so that I can find my output. It is currently lost. Hold on. So my build pane has been hidden. Found it. It's over here. My output view, I'm going to pull it up here just for a second, and we're going to figure out what errors I have made so that we can get this working. All right, what errors did I make? Error. I need to put a colon there, not a semicolon. Cout was not declared in this scope. Oh, that's interesting. I bet you I forgot my using namespace. I did. I always do. Using namespace space standard. That's going to probably fix a lot of those errors, so let's rebuild. Undefined reference to inches to centimeters. I bet you I spelled something wrong. To make it easier, I'm just going to say inches to cent, because that's easier for me to follow and to spell right as I go on. Inches to cent, and then one more time down here, inches to cent. Just to make it easier on spelling, because that's half the reason, most of the time, why I get that error. And it looks like we are doing good on building without error. And there we go. We have built well without error, so let's run it and see where we are. Perfect. So right now where we are in the code is this has successfully called inside int main, and it has successfully called the menu function. So what it is waiting for is for us to give them a variable on which to switch. So let's try 1. Now 1 corresponds to inches to cent, and we're hoping that it's going to print out to the screen you successfully called inches to centimeters. Awesome. It works. Let's try it again to make sure all of them work. The next one to try would be 2. You successfully called BMI. Perfect. The next one to try would be 3. You successfully called distance. Awesome. So it's working right so far. But the one thing you've probably noticed is that it was really annoying to have to call it multiple times. That is going to be something that we ask you to implement for part B. So here's a hint that I'm not going to write in the code for those of you who are taking the time to actually listen to this and not just skipping to the end and copying my code. For part B, what you're going to need to do is you are going to need to put a while statement completely around this menu. And I'm going to do it right now, but I'm going to delete it for those code skippers who just want to read everything. You'll need to do a while function to call does not equal 7, because I believe that 7 is the magic number down here in part B. That means quit. So while it does not equal 7, you need to put this while statement around the entire switch statement. Oops, wrong button. So that's what it's going to look like. You're going to have a while the function to call does not equal to 7. You're going to call the menu. You're going to switch on it and call your variable. You're going to switch on that value and call your various functions, and then you're going to do it again. Call your menu, switch on that value until you get 7. What you need to then do is give this an initial value, try 0, to get a function to call value, to then call the function, and then come back up here to the top. So thanks for listening to this part. That was kind of the secret code that I'm going to leave in there, but now delete so that anyone who was just skipping to the end isn't going to see it. So there we go. One too many brackets still. Let me get this fixed. Perfect. All right, so we have the menu working properly. Let's go ahead and implement one of these, and this probably is a really good start for you to get this lab done. I'm going to pick one that is going to require a couple of variables, so let's go see what we need to do. Inches to centimeter looks pretty easy. Actually, all of these are pretty easy. It's going to be like one line of code. So let's look at the various cout statements that you're going to need. Example 1. Now that I'm looking at this example, it also looks though as that I have left off one of my cout statements from my menu. So down here in the menu, there's 2 new lines, and then you need to print out, enter the number of the operation you wish to perform. Is that the word? Wish to perform, colon space, quote, and that's where you would read in your function call. So let's get our cin and cout statements perfect for each of the function calls. So when you call 1, you need to then ask for the number of inches. That's actually going to go up in your switch statement, because those cout statements are going to be specific to the option that you gave right here. So up here, you need to print out to the user cout, please enter the number of inches, colon space, and now you need to read into number of inches, which we haven't defined that yet, so let's come back up here and give us another int, number of inches, and we're going to set it equal to 0 to start with because that's good practice. Now, inches to centimeters, let's keep this a void function so that we're not actually returning anything from the function, but now that means that we're going to need to pass number of inches into here, and we're going to need to print out the number of centimeters to the screen, so let's pass that as well, and we will pass it by reference. I'm going to take the chance on spelling this one right because I already have a function called inches to cent. Oh, but that's okay. I can say number of cent here because I misspell centimeters all the time. By just typing this right here, I haven't passed it by reference. To make sure that you're passing it by reference, you need to come up here and add that part to your function prototype declaration. So you're going to need int number of inches, and now we need another int, pass it by reference, number of centimeters, and we're just going to put cent. These two exact same parameters need to go inside your function definition down here, inches to cent, and instead of printing out to the screen, you successfully called inches to centimeters, we need to do the calculation. That calculation's up here on the lab write-up. It says centimeters is 2.54 times inches. Well, guess what? I have already made a mistake. And that mistake is that centimeters needs to be a double. So right here, it says get centimeters takes a double that represents inches and returns the centimeter equivalent computed using that formula. Now, when you see this, you can see that it specifically asks you to take a double that represents the inches and return a double that represents centimeters. So that means that the way that we have structured this function right now is wrong, according to what the lab write-up is asking. So let's just go back and fix it. First, it needs these two things to be doubles. And by things, I'm talking about the actual variables. So up here, number of inches needs to be double. And we need our number of centimeters to be a double. Also, it specifically said that you can't pass both of them in there. One of them has to be returned. We have to return number of cent, and that's going to be returned from this function. So let's go up here and fix our function prototype declaration. So inches to cent needs to take a double. It no longer is going to take this reference parameter. I wanted to do it that way, but the lab write-up was going to make me do it otherwise. And this is now returning a double. This structure now represents what the lab write-up is asking you to do. We have our two doubles, number of cent, and it's going to take number of inches. So let's go down here and write our definition of our function. This is now a double. This is also a double. And we no longer have this second parameter. Also, this cout statement is not what this function is supposed to do. This function is supposed to take a double, we can call it centimeters, and centimeters equals 2.54 times number of inches. And then we need to just return centimeters. Centimeters is a double, centimeters is a double, and we're returning a double, so this is working as it should. So up here in our function, in our main function, we have a call to menu that prints the menu, and it passes the integer value by reference so that you can switch according to the user selected parameter. For the first case, we're going to call inches to cent. When you read the lab write-up, you see that you need some more cin and cout statements. Please enter the number of inches, and then you need to read in from the user the number of inches, pass that to inches, and get out the centimeters. So now the last piece is to print that to the user. And it looks like we have two new lines right here. New line, centimeters equals number of sent. And we're going to have some new lines after that. Perfect. Let's see if this function is now working as it is supposed to. Let's build. I'm going to bring my output over here. We have an error. Let's find out what it is. Error, expected a semicolon before the string. I've left off my two operators right there. Let's try it again. Build. Perfect. Let's see if we can get this to interact like the lab write-up has. Let's run it. I'm going to move this one over here so I can see what the lab write-up has us do. Enter the operation you wish to perform. I'm going to do operation 1. Please enter the number of inches. That's perfect. Let's do 5. Centimeters is 12.7 without the number of decimal places correct. So make sure that you go back in there and you add your cout.setf precision so that you can get that print correctly. But I also see that I have too many spaces in there. So I'm going to go back here and get rid of my extra space so that I'm following the spacing rules properly. That extra space was this right here. So that is how you can go through and complete all of these functions. For BMI and distance between 2 points, you are going to need to add in these extra statements, and then you need to print out the answer to the user. So without doing the math, let's just show where to add in those statements. For BMI, if you switch on function to call and you switch down here to 2, you're going to need to print out to the user. You're going to need to do a printout statement right here. It says cout. Enter the number. That's not the right one. Please enter your weight and height. Please enter your weight and height. Colon space cin. We'll read those into weight and height. And now we've declared 2 variables that we aren't using. Reverse that. Now we have used 2 variables that we haven't declared. So let's come up here and let's see how they want those to be declared in the lab write-up. BMI computes your body mass index. Your function will take 2 int parameters, weight in pounds and height in inches. So these are going to be 2 integers, int, weight, and height. Let's initialize those to 0 for good coding practice. Down here for the case 2, please enter your weight and height. You read in weight and height. And then down here in your function definition, you need to do this calculation, and your BMI needs to be a double. BMI is a double, and this is the math that you're going to need to do down here inside your function definition for BMI. That's where that's going to go. Make sure you follow how it wants you to structure your function. It needs to take 2 integers, and it needs to compute the BMI as a double. This one does not say whether you have to return it or use it as a reference parameter, so that design can be up to you right here for BMI. But then afterwards, you're going to need to print out to the screen the user's calculated BMI, as shown down here in example 2. And the last example is the distance function, and before you call distance, there's another cout statement. Enter the number of, oh, I did that last time. I meant to say, please enter 2 points as x1, x2, x1, y1, x2, y2, colon space, cin. And we're going to read those right into x1, y1, x2, y2. We'll need to go back and declare these as variables. That's how we've been doing this lab. So let's go see if they want those to be doubles or integers. Distance between 2 points takes 4 integer parameters. So let's go declare all of those as integers and make that say as, not x. All right, so we have x1 equals 0, comma, if I can type a comma, y1 equals 0, x2 equals 0, and y2 equals 0. Okay, So we have all of these parameters declared for the first three functions. We have implemented the first function, inches to cents, and it is working correctly. We have set up your cout statements to gather the information that you need. So where you are right now, you need to write the function definition for BMI and for distance. However, the way that the function prototype declaration and the definitions are set up right now is not going to work. You need to add in some parameters that you're going to pass to BMI, and you need to pass the right parameters to distance, and then you need to use them properly down here to calculate what you need. So let's build this to see where we are to make sure that this is working. Looks good. Let's make sure our various print statements are working. So if we do 1, that's going to be number of inches. I'm just going to pick that many inches, and it converts it to centimeters. Perfect. Let's run it again. And if I do 2 this time, I should get an extra weight and height. I'm just going to enter those. Awesome. And the last thing that we need to do is check to make sure number 3 is working correctly. Here's some points. And you successfully called distance. All right, great. So this is a pretty good significant start on Lab 6. We have used your menu function. We have used your menu down here in a whole separate function. And one of my big hints for Part B is that this entire process down here inside the menu function is going to go inside a while loop, because you need to make sure that they give you a valid answer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And that is down here, shown down here in Part B, what your menu eventually should look like. We have successfully set up the structure for a couple of functions, and we have some void functions that really don't do anything yet. But here's an example of a function that is going to work. And if you want to know how to pass by reference for later, I have shown you how to pass your function to I have shown you how to pass an integer into your menu function so that you can switch on that for later sections of the lab. This is all I'm going to leave you guys with for Lab 6 Part A. Good luck. I hope you get it done, because you all deserve that extra credit, and I hope you have a good fall break.